Hello, my name is Mike Buller and this video introduces the concept of 2D drafting using Autodesk's Revit 2018. This first video looks at drawing a section through a portal frame and concentrates mainly on the foundation and the main elements of the frame itself. Subsequent videos will also look at the details associated with the portal frame, for example adding purlins and cladding, and then finally looking at dimensioning and text. To start this project, we're firstly going to open a new drawing based on a standard University of Leeds Revit template. So if we go to New, and then I'm going to Browse, and we're going to load the University of Leeds Revit template and select Open, and we want to create a new project based on this template, not a new project template itself. So we're going to leave the option Create New Project selected and select OK. Once that's loaded, you will see that by default it goes straight to a drafting view. This is the standard setup for the University of Leeds drawing template, and on this drafting view it details some of the elements and hatching styles that are associated with 2D drafting, and that's what we're going to be concentrating on: 2D drafting of a portal frame section. So first of all, to start, we want to create a new drafting view. So if we, across the top, if we go to View and then Drafting View, and you'll see it's asking firstly for a name, so we'll call this Portal Section. It's also asking us to specify a drawing scale. This scale is the scale that is used when generating the actual drawing within a title block. So you need to think about the overall dimensions of the frame and make sure that it fits your piece of paper at a certain specified scale. We're going to use a scale of 1 to 50. So in the drop down, select 1 to 50 and select OK. And that will open a blank drafting view. This is effectively an endless piece of paper. To start our portal frame, we firstly go to the Annotate tab because we're going to add a foundation. Listed underneath the Annotate tab are most of the primary commands associated with 2D drawing in Revit. So if we go to Region, because what we want to do for the foundation is to construct a rectangular region and give it a fill which denotes concrete, so it's concrete in section. So select Region, and I'm going to draw a concrete foundation which is 2 meters wide and 650 millimeters deep. So select a point on the screen. Drag the cursor to the right until it locks in the horizontal plane, and as you can see on screen, that's indicated by the little double-headed red arrows, and then the cursor says horizontal. And we can type in the dimension, so we want it 2 meters, so we're drawing in millimeters. 2 meters is obviously 2000 millimeters, and press return. That gives you the top line for your dimension. Now if you drag the line vertically, you can see the dimension associated with it, and the angle is dynamic. So we want to come vertically down at 90 degrees. It will automatically snap to that. That is one of the predefined snap positions. So vertically down, and we're going to come down 650. So again, type 650 and return. And then we want to go back. So we want to go back from left to right, again dragging it across 2 meters, and you will see that as you drag it across, it will automatically snap or find the end point of the previous line that you drew. And if you note the dimension underneath, that is now 2 meters again. So select that point and then close. So we're going to close it. That is effectively your foundation. It doesn't have any hatch associated with it at the moment. It just has a solid color in black. If you look in the properties box over on the left, you see it's a filled region and solid color black. We want a filled region but instead of being solid colour black, if we scroll up, we have material concrete opaque. So we're going to select that, and you'll note it hasn't done anything yet because at the moment the command is still active. So if we select the green tick, that will finish the edit mode. And as you can see, we now have a foundation. Click anywhere to one side, and you'll notice that the foundation effectively has no line around it. So what we forgot to do, we forgot to specify the line type when we drew the original foundation. So we'll go back and edit that. So we'll double click on the edge of it, and at the top here you will see the modify and edit box is now made active. If we select a line, and we can change it from being invisible, and we'll draw it as a medium wide line. So again, we select the lines, we could hold Control down and select multiple lines at the same time, and we can go and make them all medium wide lines. We've now finished editing the foundation. So again, we go back and select the finish edit mode, the green tick, select the green tick, and that will finish the editing. You now have a foundation with a solid line around it. That gives us a starting point. Now from here we want to build up the column. So we're going to add to this a centre line, the centre line of the column. So we can select from the detail line, we are going to select a centre line, and then snapping to the midpoint of the foundation. So if you move your cursor across the bottom of the foundation, you'll end up with a purple triangle. The triangle means it is automatically going to snap to the midpoint of the selected entity. So we want from the midpoint of the bottom of the foundation, and we'll drag the line up, and let's say we want it to go up 8 meters. So we just type in 8,000 and return. And then press escape and escape again, and there we have your centre line. To make it look better on screen or on the paper when we go to plot it, we'll just drag by selecting To make this look a bit better, we'll just select the centre line, and we'll drag the end of it down just below the foundation, and again press escape. Once you've drawn the centre line, the next thing to add would be the column itself. Now there's a couple of ways of doing this, and I'm first going to show you how to draw the profile of the column using a standard Revit Family section. So if we go to Insert, and what we're going to do, we're going to load a family, and we're going to load a family associated with universal beam sections. Now we are drawing in 2D, and in the UK library we have detail items. If we select that, this gives, based on the NBS, so the National Building Specification, D, E, F, G, etc., they are all compliant with the National Building Specification. So based on the NBS, this gives a whole series of two-dimensional details of standard building components. We want to go to section G, that is structural carcassing, metal, timber, etc. So double click that. We want some structural steel framing. Note the G10 again, that is standard NBS reference for structural steel framing. So a double click that. We want a steel section, and then if we scroll right the way down to the bottom, you should find detail item universal beam. So we want some universal beam, so select that and open. And this opens a dialog that details all the standard universal beams. Now I'm going to import two because we want two different profiles. So if we scroll down, I want to select the 457-191-82. That's that selection. That's entity there. Then if we scroll down a little bit more, we want a 406 178 74. That will be for the rafter. So if I hold Control down and select that one as well, that, when I click OK, will load both of those two columns as Revit families into your current project. Note nothing's happened on screen because we haven't actually inserted one. All we've done is loaded them into the background within the project. So once you've loaded your column sections, we can start inserting them. So we're going to insert a component. So from the Annotate tab, select Component, and by default it will automatically pick up the last component that you loaded. If you press the spacebar key, that will rotate the element, so you can rotate it to the correct orientation. We want it to be horizontal, and I'm going to place it at the midpoint of the foundation, so where the foundation intersects the center line of our proposed column. So once it's inserted, press Escape and Escape again to cancel the command. Now the column's in the correct position, we're going to use it as a guide to draw the profile of the main portal column. So from the detail line, we want to draw a medium line. This is going to be for the outside face of the column. So select the endpoint, we want to go vertically up, and again we're going to drag it up 8 meters. We'll trim this later on to make it the right height, but to start off we'll just go 8 meters. And press Escape only once because we wanted to draw another line on the opposite side, and again we're going to go up 8 meters. And press Escape. Now you want to draw a thin line, so the thin line will denote the thickness of the flange, and we want to go on the inside and again drag that up 8 meters and return. Escape once because we're going to carry on the command, and then we're going to draw another thin line the other side, so 8 meters. Return, then escape twice, so escape, escape. We've now finished with the column because all we were using it for was a guide to get the size right. So now we can delete that section, and if we zoom out a bit, you now have a foundation with the start of what will be our column sitting on top of it. We'll leave that bit there for the minute. I now want to put in the setting out point. Now, in terms of structural detailing, the setting out point for a portal frame, or one of them, would be the intersection of the center line of the column to the top flange of the rafter. So if we put in a detail line, and we'll put it in as a medium line again. So if we select medium line, and I want to draw it from the top of the foundation, and I'm going to draw it half the width of my portal frame. So it's going to go to the center line of the portal frame, and that is 11.592. So 11.592 meters, and press return. And then escape, escape to cancel the command. Okay, we now have our line, and I want to move that from the top of the foundation to the setting out point. So with the line selected, you should have modify lines up at the top in green, and over to the left we have 4 arrows. That is the move command. So select the move command. We want to move it from the end point, the little square, the red square, that denotes you've got the end point selected. So click the end point, drag it vertically up and type in the dimension 5675. That is the dimension from the top of the foundation to the setting out point, and return. Now if we scroll out a bit and pan down, and there we have our top of the rafter. It obviously needs to be at an angle, so now we want to rotate it. So again, with the line selected, the modify toolbar comes up and we can rotate it. So selecting the rotate command, the circular or the circle with the arrowhead on it. So select the rotate command, and you will note that by default it automatically snaps to the middle of your line. Well, we want to rotate it about one end. So if you go up to the toolbar and select place, and we can then select the end point, now it will rotate it about the end point of the line, and we can type in an angle. The angle of this particular roof is 15 degrees, so 15, return. And that effectively rotates the top flange of the rafter through 15 degrees. So press escape, and I just want to zoom into the top of the rafter and column intersection, because we're now going to insert the second section we imported earlier on and use that as a guide to draw the rafter. So again, we'll go back to the component tab, and this time we don't want the 457.191.82 as selected, so select the drop down and you want the 406.178.74. If it's not there, you'll need to go back and load the correct family from the detailed items. So we're going to select that entity, and I want to just pop it anywhere. So just stick it anywhere close to the intersection or the eaves of the portal. So I'm going to pop it in there and then press escape and escape again to cancel that command. One thing that's worth noting, that Revit is very much a drafting tool, and if you read any documentation on it, all the literature suggests that you place entities in Revit, and then once they're placed, you then go back and edit them, move them to the exact position where you want them, scale them and rotate them, etc. So that's exactly what we're doing now. We've placed the element, I now want to move it. So select the entity, go to the move command, and I want to move it from the end point of the flange, and I want to put it on the end point of what is going to be our rafter. We also now want to rotate it by 15 degrees. So again, the rotate command, we can pick a place. We want to rotate it about the end point, and again, we're going to rotate it by 15 degrees. So 15 is the angle, and return, and that will rotate your universal beam section. We can now use that as a guide to draw in our rafter. So press escape, and we want to copy the top line. So select the line and then select copy. We want to draw, or we want to copy it multiple times. So in the green toolbar, select multiple, and we want to go from the end point of the top flange to the inside face, the end point of the inside face, and again the same on the bottom, and the bottom of right at the very bottom as well. So you end up with effectively 4 lines denoting the 2 flanges. And again, press escape and escape again. Once you've got the 4 lines in, we really want to edit the inner lines to make them thin lines. So if we select the line, and then from the drop down select thin line, and again for the bottom one as well, and thin line again. That effectively denotes the rafter. So now we can press escape and delete the steel section. We don't need that anymore, so we can delete that. And if we zoom out a little bit, you now have what looks like a rafter and a column. Once we've got the rafter and column, we can now start building up the detail of the connection that connects the two together. So we just zoom in a little bit. And what I want to start by drawing is an end plate. So an end plate that would be welded to the rafter. And we're going to have an end plate that is, let's say, 20 millimeters thick. So we want to copy this vertical line. So we want to copy that over 20 millimeters, and that will form the end plate. So again, select the copy command, and we want to copy it from the intersection. We're just going to drag it over. So drag your cursor horizontally and type in 20. And that gives you, effectively gives you an end plate. So if we press escape to cancel that command and escape again, the top of the end plate will sit 20 millimeters proud of the top of the rafter. So if we go to detail line, I'm going to make these thin lines just so that we get some definition. So I'm going to put a line from the intersection of the end plate and the rafter, and I'm just going to pull it across horizontally for the minute and press escape and escape again. And whilst we're here, I want to change the end plate. We'll change that to a thin line. And we want to, as I said just now, we want to have the top of the end plate 20 millimeters clear of the rafters. So select the line for the top of the end plate, and we're going to move it. So select the move command from the end point, drag it up and type in 20 and press return. So that's going to be the top of our end plate. So escape, escape, and that will cancel that command. We can now start thinking about tidying this up and trimming some of the lines to make our detail. So select the line, or select any of the entities to activate the modify toolbar, and we want to trim the end plate to the top of the end plate. So go to the trim extend corner. Now this will make a nice neat right angle connection between the two lines. So select the command, select one line and the second line, and that trims the two together. And then press escape, we can cancel that command. We also want to trim our rafter lines, so these four, 1, 2, 3, 4, we want to trim those four and trim them back to the end plate. So again, we're going to select the command. So up at the top on the toolbar, we have trim extend multiple elements, because we want to trim back 4 or extend 4 elements. So select the command. We want to trim them all to the edge of the end plate. So select where you're trimming to, and then select the part of the line you want to keep, and you'll see that the part that's going to remain is highlighted with a blue dotted line down through the middle. So we want to keep that part of the top line, that part of the bottom line. We also want to keep that one as well. This line here isn't long enough, so we need to extend it. So again, if you click on it, it will automatically extend it to the line we select, to the reference line we selected originally. And again, that's denoted by the little dashed blue line. So select the line and that will extend it to where we want it. And press escape. And the last part of this, we would then trim this back. But before we do that, we're going to copy it down so we get the full depth of the end plate we require. So with the element selected, we're going to go to the copy command, select the end, and I want to copy it down 850 millimeters, so 850, and return. And that has put a line in for the end of my rafter. And then escape, escape. There we go. We now have a line for the top and bottom of the rafter. Again, we can trim the top and bottom of the end plate. Again, we can trim the corner on the bottom to tidy that up. And the last bit of this would be to trim these two long lines back just to give the end plate some thickness. So select the reference line and select the part you want to keep. So we want to keep just the little lines there. That gives us an end plate. And once we have an end plate, we can carry on building up the detail. So the next thing would be to put in the length of the haunch. Now the haunch is the strengthening element to the end of the rafter to give it some rotational stiffness. And the haunch on this particular portal frame is 2.47 meters long, measured from the center line. So we're going to select the center line and we're going to copy that. So select anywhere on the center line, drag it over, again make sure it's at right angles, so make sure you're dragging it horizontally, and we want to copy it 2470 millimeters over. So once we've marked out how long the haunch is, next thing we need to do is to work out where the bottom of the haunch is going to connect to the end plate. Now the haunch will come down and connect 20 millimeters up from the bottom of the end plate. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the small line that denotes the end of the end plate. and I'm going to copy it. So we're going to copy it from the bottom and we're going to copy it up 20 millimeters and return and escape to cancel the command. I now want to pick up one end of that line and I'm going to drag it, and again I'm going to drag it to the end of the haunch, and then we can delete the center line, and then we really want to just change the line thickness, so we'll make that into a medium line. We now have a line that denotes the bottom of the haunch. We want to give that some thickness because the haunch is actually cut from a piece of universal beam, so it's the same section as the rafter, and the flange on this particular rafter is 16 millimeters thick, so we need to offset that bottom line. So on the modified toolbar we select offset. We're going to give it a dimension, 16 millimeters. And then if you hover over the line, you'll see a little dotted blue line, and just by moving the mouse very slightly over the top of the line, that line will flick from side to side. That denotes which side you're going to offset this particular line by. So we want to offset it to the inside as shown, so we'll select that, and there you go, it pops another line in at 16 millimeters from the original. Press escape to cancel the command, and then select that line because we now want to change that to a thin line. And the last part of this is we need to trim both ends, because at the moment it's overhanging the end plate, and on the other end it'll be overhanging the rafter. So if we select the trim, we can just do a single trim. So we select the reference line and the part of the line we want to trim, and we can scroll up to the other end and do exactly the again, select the reference line and the part of the line we want to trim, and zoom back out, and there we have a typical haunch detail. It's worth noting that at this stage you should probably save your project, so we'll just go to save it. I'm going to just drop it on my desktop for the minute, and we're going to call it portal section and save. Once it's saved, we can now continue with some of the detailing. I would like next to cut the column off to the right height, so we're going to put a line in for the top of the column. So again, go back to the annotate, go to detail line. We want to put a medium line in to match the line width that we've used to date for the column. So medium line, and the column will be cut at the top of the end plate. So we could select the end point, drag it across until it intersects the line denoting the outside of the column, and click. There we go, that's the top of the column. And as before, we could tidy this up a little bit. So if we escape to cancel the command, select the line, and we're going to trim, extend, multiple. So we want to trim and extend to the line, and we want to keep all of those 4 lines. So you select the entity you want to keep, and then press escape, and there we have the top of your column. So once we've detailed the end plate and the haunch, the next step would be to add some bolts, because these are obviously bolted together. First of all, we're going to add some little lines in here to denote the center line of the bolts. So if we go back to our annotate tab and a detail line, we're just going to put one in anywhere for the minute, and we want it about that sort of length, and maybe a bit shorter. That sort of length would be perfect, and press escape. As I said earlier on, part of Revit is about detailing and then editing the detail once it's actually on the screen, on the paper effectively. So we're going to select the line, and we're now going to edit it. I want a nice thin line, so we'll put a thin line in. There's no point putting a center line in because the line's too short to be able to actually denote a centre line properly. And we want to move that line, so I want to move it from its midpoint, and I'm going to put it on top of the column for the minute. And now I'm going to move it again to give me the spacing down to the first bolt. So again, select the move command from the intersection, and we're going to drag it down, and we're going to come down 80 millimeters, and that's where our first bolt would be. So once it's in the right place, escape, we'll cancel the command, and I now want to give some indication of the bolt itself. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another filled region. So again, go to the filled region, and this time it's actually going to be very small. So we want to go from, let's say, pick any point on screen. Let's say we're going to drag it across 100 millimeters. We're going to come vertically down at 22 because it's a 20 millimeter bolt which would go through a 22 millimeter hole, and press return. And we're going to go back again, do it the same length. So wait until you see the snap, so that it snaps to the end, or it snaps parallel to the end point of the first line you did, and select, and then close your filled region. We want that to be solid. So again, we go over to the properties menu, and we'll scroll down to be solid color black, and select and finish the command. Then click anywhere. That is effectively your bolt. It's the wrong length at the moment, but as I've said previously, once you've drawn it, you can then edit it accordingly. So we're going to pick that one up, we're going to move it. So we're going to move, and we want from the midpoint, so again, the little red triangle, and we want to move it to the intersection of your centre line and the column flange. Once we've moved it, we can now stretch it to the right size. So let's double click on it, and we can pick up that line, and we can pull it in and stretch it to the right size, and click finish to modify it, and it will automatically pull the hatched region in as well. Double click outside, and that is effectively a diagrammatic representation of the bolt and the centre line. What we need to do is to copy that multiple times to show where the other bolts are positioned. So using a rubber band, so if we go from top left, drag your cursor across the entities you want to copy and release. That selects those two entities. Go to the copy command, make sure that multiple is connected, and we want to copy from the end point, drag it down 80 millimeters, return, and repeat that. So another 80 millimeters and return, and then repeat it again, but this time we're going to drag it 440 millimeters, so 440, and return. And the last set, we're going to drag down another 80 millimeters. So you effectively have 5 bolts in this plane, 5 bolts the other side of the rafter, so it would be a 10 bolt connection. And escape to cancel that command, escape to finish completely, and that is your bolts for this particular connection detail added to your frame. And if we scroll out a bit, it's looking a little bit, or that particular area is looking a little bit more like a portal frame. You'll notice that I'm only working on one side at the moment. That's deliberate because we can mirror everything we've done. Once we've sorted out one side, we can mirror it all about the centre line, and that will duplicate it on the other side. But before we do that, we need to complete the detail of the column to foundation connection. So if we scroll in, zoom right in to the foundation, and what we want to do first of all is we need to create a gap between the top of the foundation and the underside of the plate that would be bolted to the foundation. That gap is where they would put some grout. It enables the steel erectors to erect the steel frame so that everything's level, because they could put different packers underneath the column and get them all level, and then they pour some grout in there and grout it all together. So first of all, we're going to add a line. So we want a detail line, and we're going to just select the end point of the foundation, and we'll pull it across and press escape. Now if we go and select that line and move it up, we're going to move it up to give a 25mm gap. So drag your cursor vertically, type in 25 and return. That is effectively the underside of the base plate. Now for this frame we're going to have a 30mm base plate, so again select the line. This time we're going to copy it from the end point, and we're going to copy it 30mm up and return and press escape. Now we've got the thickness of the base plate delineated. If you select the top line, that activates the toolbar. We can go to Trim, Extend, Multiple. As a reference line, we want the top line of the base plate, and we want to trim all the column lines back to it, because that is where the column itself is going to finish. So now we have the column with a base plate attached to it. Press escape to cancel the command, and we just now need to give the base plate a width, and in this case the width of the base plate is 500mm. So what we're going to do, we're going to select the center line and we're going to offset that. So we're going to offset it each side by 250mm, giving us an overall width of 500. So in the offset dimension, type 250 and return. Again, hover over the line, flick it from side to side, and you'll see where the line's going to be copied. So we want one each side, one that side, and then one that side, and press escape. We want to change those two lines, so select one, hold Control down, select the second one. We want to change them from center lines to thin lines. We also want to change the two base plate lines from medium lines to thin lines. And then we can go around and trim those and tidy them up. So again, going back to our Trim, Extend Corner, and select the various lines and just go around and trim them to make a small rectangle on the bottom of the column. That is effectively your base plate. Now we've got the base plate, we would add some bolt detail as well. So all we're going to do is indicate the position of the bolts with a simple line. So we're going to select the center line, and again we're going to offset it, and this time we want to go 180mm, because the bolts would be offset 180mm either side of the center lines. So one bolt row there and the second one the other side. Press escape, select the two lines by holding the Control key down, and we're going to change them from center lines, and we'll call them a thin line, because again the lines are going to be too short to be properly displayed as center lines. We want to trim them down a bit because obviously at this stage they're a bit too long. So again, from the Annotate tab, we're going to put in a detail line, and we're going to stop the line somewhere there. Press escape, and we'll have another one to give just a depth to our two bolts. Once we have those, again select the line, and now this time we're going to trim multiple elements. We now want to trim our two center lines. So trim, select the entity we want to trim to, and select the part we want to trim, and press escape, and then repeat that for the bottom line. Press escape, select those two lines and delete them because we don't need those anymore, and then save your project. And as with the main bolts, the other part to this, we really ought to give the hole a bit of definition, so the bolt hole through the plate. So we'll add again a filled area or a filled region. So from the Annotate, we go to Region, and this time we're going to put a 26mm hole through there to take a 20mm bolt. So select any point. Again, we're just in we're drafting at the moment. We horizontally 26, return. Vertically, we know our plate is 30 millimeters, so 30, return, and we can go back and finish that filled region. We want it solid black, that's correct, and finish the edit mode. We can now move it. We want to move it from the midpoint to the intersection, and then copy that one from the midpoint again to the intersection of where the other bolt will be, and press escape and escape again. And that gives us an indication of the holding down bolts that would hold the column to the foundation. And again, save your project. Now we have the main foundation drawn. If we zoom back out again, we can concentrate on the connection at the apex, because all I'm aiming to do in this particular video is just the basic frame itself. In subsequent videos we will add the detail of the rails, some walls, etc. So we're just concentrating on the basic frame. The first thing we need to do is just check the half span of the frame. So if you recall earlier on, we made our horizontal line. When we put in the setting out point, we made our horizontal line 11,592, so 11.592 meters. That has probably changed because we rotated the line. So we need to go and just make sure that's correct. So if we select the center line, so double click it, that will activate the modify command, and we are going to copy it. So we want to copy it from the end and horizontally across 11,592, return. And as you can see, all our lines where they've been rotated are now slightly short. So select the line again, select the end point, and we just drag it up. Drag it up beyond the rafter for the minute, that's fine. Zoom into it, and we want to extend our 4 rafter lines to intersect with the center line of the building. So again, select any line just to activate the modify commands, and go to the extend trim option, select the reference line and select the lines we want to keep. So again, we're keeping all 4 lines for the rafter, and press escape. We now have a similar process to go through to generate the haunch connection in the apex. So we're just going to concentrate on one side because, as I said earlier on, we can mirror it later on, which will save us a little bit of time. So if we select the center line, again the apex connection has an end plate, it's 20 millimeters thick, so we're going to offset by 20 millimeters that center line. So 20, select the center line or hover over it just to one side and click. That will give us a thickness for the end plate. Press escape, and really we want to change those 2 lines to make them not center lines, we want them to be thin lines. And we can then trim the rafter lines back to the edge of the end plate. So from the trim extend option, select the reference line and trim your 4 lines back. And again, as with the connection detail earlier on, we want the end plate to extend 20 millimeters above the rafter. So from the annotate, we're going to put in a detail line. We want it to be a nice thin line. So from the end point of the rafter, we're going to drag a line horizontally, doesn't matter how long it is, and press escape and escape again. And then we're going to move that thin line, we're going to move it up by 20 millimeters. So select anywhere on the line and drag it up 20, return. We can now offset that line to give us a depth for the end plate, and in this case the overall depth of the end plate is 805 millimeters. So select the line, double click it to activate the modify functionality, and we're going to copy it from the end point, and we're going to copy it down 805 millimeters, 805, return and escape. And as before, our the bottom of the haunch, the plate wants to be 20 millimeters below the haunch line itself. So we're going to select the line and we're going to copy that one. We're going to copy it vertically up by 20 millimeters, return and escape, escape. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that line horizontally, literally straight across horizontally. That is the bottom line for your haunch. So we could change that to a medium line and then offset it. Again, it's made of a section of the rafter, so it's the same size beam as the rafter, so that we want to offset it by 16 millimeters to give the haunch a thickness. And escape, and then we'll change that line to a medium line, sorry, to a thin line. And the last bit of this little part, we want to trim these two, so trim them back to the underside of the rafter. So extend, trim, select the reference line and select the two parts you want to keep. That gives us effectively the bottom of the haunch. And then we can tidy up this end and just trim all our lines back using the corner trim function, and the same on the bottom. And that gives us a basic haunch detail at the apex. Note, I haven't drawn the bolts in yet, because if we mirror them you'll end up with bolts drawn on top of bolts. So we'll mirror the frame first of all, then we'll add the bolts as the last part of this video. So first of all, I just want to extend my center line. I'm going to extend it up above the line of the apex. So we want to extend it up a bit. And now I'm going to mirror the whole frame. So if we select everything and we select the mirror function, so we want to mirror it and draw an axis. So mirror everything we've selected, and the axis we want to, or the line, the axis for the mirror is the center line. So it's going to be basically the haunch line. Select the top and the bottom and it will automatically mirror all the entities over. You now have a full portal frame. We ought to check just to make sure that dimensionally we've got it right. So overall the width from center line to center line should be 23,148. So if we go to annotate, and we can put in a linear dimension from the end point of one center line to the end point of the second one, click, and we have 23,184. That is correct. I said 148, it is actually 23,184. That is correct. And the last part, we just need to add the bolts in the top. So that's exactly the same process as before. So to make life easy, we're actually going to just copy some of these entities. So we've already drawn a bolt and a center line. So we're going to copy, and we don't want a multiple copy, we're only going to do a singular one from the midpoint, and we're going to stick it right at the top of the rafter. So we're going to put it there. And then we can move that one down in a second. So now it's at the top, positioned at the top of the rafter. You'll note that it needs editing slightly, so we can pick up the end and we can drag it out so that it's the right width. And that one looks like it's right already. Okay, that gives us the bolt through both end plates, and press escape and tick the finish edit mode and escape again. So now we have the bolt drawn correctly. We can pick up both of them by using the control key to select the two. We can then move them, and we're going to move them from the end point vertically down. We're going to come down by 80 millimeters. So once we have the first bolt positioned correctly, again we can select both of them, and we can do a multiple copy this time, and we're going to copy from the end point. We're going to come down 80 millimeters again, and then we're going to copy that bolt, and we're going to come down 500 millimeters, and the last set from the end point, and we're going to be down another 80. and press escape and escape again, and that is effectively the first part of your portal frame. So that gives you the very basic frame. This, as I said earlier, is the first video in a series. The next one will consider how to add some of the details, so some purlins, some block work, maybe some cladding, and the final one will look at detailing and adding some notes. I hope you have found this video useful. If you have any comments or suggestions, please do send me an email at the address shown on screen. Thank you for watching.